What's up, everybody? Rob here. So, one of the most talked about and interesting aspects of the Middle Ages is the warfare. Things like weaponry, armor, military formations, great battles, stuff like that. I mean, everybody's interested in this to some degree. I mean, I love it, you love it, and if you didn't, yeah, you have no idea why you're here. But something that's often overlooked is the training for warfare. I mean, fighting with a sword or really any other type of weapon requires some degree of practice, skill, and training. I mean, you can take in a completely untrained amateur, give him a spear, and hopefully he'll, stab the enemy and not himself or his friends or something. But generally speaking, you have to know what you're doing. So in this regard, hunting, especially amongst the nobility, was a perfect way to train its members in the use of arms and how to kill things quickly and efficiently. So here we go, a very brief look at hunting during the Middle Ages. Now, everybody from all walks of life would hunt, but for different reasons. For the lower class, they hunted for food almost exclusively, and they hunted on common land. Really briefly about how the land worked. Land was divided basically between reserved areas, which was for hunting for the nobility or the royalty. In some cases, it was only the royalty, and even the nobles needed a special a license to hunt there. And there was also common land, which was owned by everybody, and that's pretty much any animal that wandered onto common land was fair game. Now, as just a brief aside here, as time went on, common land became closed off, and nobles would just start taking over the common land, and this led to a general outcry amongst the population, and actually was the impetus for the Robin Hood story, but another matter for another day. Now, the nobility hunted, but for a different set of reasons. Now, they did hunt for food, of course. I mean, you're not going to let all that meat go to waste. And for sport, too. I mean, they did do it for the enjoyment of the hunt, the thrill of it all, but also as a way to train for warfare. Knights especially would train tactics and coordination, as well as the most efficient way to kill something. Sparring with wooden swords or blunt swords and hitting a straw practice dummy only takes someone so far. Actually embedding a spear or sword into something that is thrashing, moving, screaming, bleeding all over the place, and being able to do so with a steady hand, well, I'm just going to say it's generally frowned upon if you start doing this to your local peasantry. I know nobles did have, a lot of rights over the peasantry, but that sort of behavior is generally frowned upon. Not to mention that the peasants were the economic backbone of the medieval economy, and that nobles made their money off of the labor of peasants. So if you stab them, that means less peasants to work, which means you suffer financially. Overall, though, stabbing peasants is just not a good idea. Now, there are many types of hunting. One of the more famous or popular ones of the Middle Ages was falconry, hawking and falconry, they're two separate things technically, but basically they're the same idea. You take a bird of prey, a hawk or a falcon of some kind, you release it to either capture the animal that you're going after directly, usually a pheasant of some kind, but occasionally small game like rabbits and such. And if nothing else, you flush the animal out of cover with these birds of prey, and then you shoot it with an arrow. There's also something called ferreting, which is exactly what it sounds like. You take a ferret and you dump it into a rabbit hole, and the rabbits flee, they panic, and run out of the hole to escape the ferret, and then you whack him in the back of the head with a club. One of the other more popular types of hunting included just, simple stalking, which is when you sneak up on an animal and you shoot it with a bow or a crossbow. And, of course, there were things like blind hunting, which you get up hunting blind, basically, either a tree stand or something, like basically the same hunting that we do nowadays, but instead of using a rifle, you would use a bow and arrow or a crossbow. There were also a number of different traps that could be used to snare an animal, things like nets, strings or ropes tied across a trail that an animal will be driven towards, stuff like that. But those are more or less the falconry was for the upper classes, but the traps, the blind hunting, all that other stuff, that was generally for the lower classes. I'm going to be focusing on the two types of hunting that were done almost exclusively by nobility. That would be called the bow and stable hunt and the par force. Now, before someone could set out hunting, they required a certain degree of equipment. And generally speaking, the gear that was used was very similar to that was used in warfare. A bow and arrow, of course, crossbows, spears, swords, as well as daggers and knives. Nets were used on occasion, but generally speaking, this method was looked down upon. Now, in addition to the weaponry that would be carried, there were two essential animal companions that would be required for these two particular types of hunting. The first would be a horse, which a hunter would ride upon, obviously, in order to keep up with the game animals. But interestingly enough, while stalking an animal, and yes, stalking was generally used by the lower classes, but nobles did do it on occasion, a skilled hunter could actually screen themselves. They could walk behind a horse or alongside a horse and slowly creep up on a deer. Usually this was done for deer. Deer generally do freak out when they see a bipedal animal with sharp pointy things that send death in their general direction. So by standing behind the horse, deer generally don't freak out when a fellow herbivorous, creature is nearby them. So that allowed the hunter to sneak up on them pretty easily and effectively. The other essential animal for a medieval hunt would be the dog. Now, dogs came in many different breeds, but generally speaking, they had two particular types that were used for hunting. The first was the Lymer, the Lymer, which was a scent hound, which was so named because it would be restrained on a leash or a line. They would track the game animal and then alert the handlers to its presence. Now, there are many different breeds of dogs that are no longer existent today that were around during the Middle Ages, but something like a bloodhound or a pointer would pretty much fit this role pretty nicely. Now, there are a number of medieval sources that actually refer to this type of animal as a bloodhound. Now, whether that's a relation to a current, the current breed of dog, a specific breed called a bloodhound, or if it was just a generic term for this particular type, I honestly couldn't say. I haven't looked into it too deeply. I happen to think, though, I have this feeling that it's just sort of a generic term, but I'm honestly not positive about that. One of the main features of this particular type of dog is that they were generally pretty quiet because you didn't want to spook the game until it was time to actually, hunt it. This was just more of, just point out where the animal is, track it down, and find it, not frighten it. The second major type of dog was called the Rache, Rache. These would be louder and more boisterous dogs that would operate in groups of between 1 and 2 dozen, sometimes even more. They came in various different types depending on what you were going after. There would be greyhounds for small game, as well as mastiffs, wolfhounds, and if you're going after birds, something like a spaniel, something like that. And there was an extinct breed known as an Alouette. It was the job of these particular dogs to drive on the game and, depending on what type of hunting you were doing, either corner the animal or to actually close with and engage it with its jaws. Alouettes in particular were known to be particularly aggressive and very popular for this purpose. As such, they were very aggressive dogs and were known to bite their handlers, horses, lord of the hunt, pretty much anyone and everything that moved. They were so prone to biting that one commentator actually said that if an Alouette was killed during the hunt, it was really not considered that great of a loss. So yeah, make of that whatever you will. Alright, now that all of your equipment is ordered, it's actually time to set out on the hunt itself. Now, of the two types of hunting, the first one is the bow and stable hunt. Now, this is the less dangerous version of hunting and involved men on horseback, usually accompanied by dogs, who would drive the animals toward waiting hunters, who will be armed with bows and arrows or crossbows and later on early firearms. This is probably the least strenuous type of hunting, so it was particularly enjoyed by women as well as the old and the infirm. Queen Elizabeth I of England was particularly fond of hunting in this manner. The main target animal for this particular type of hunt would be deer, but occasionally rabbits and other small game would be driven as well. Now, it is the least strenuous of the two different types of hunting, but it did require a great deal of coordination and horsemanship to execute it properly, and it did run the risk of friendly fire incidents, which did happen with disturbing regularity. But yeah, basically that's all it is. You take some horses, you drive the game towards a firing line, and that's pretty much all there is to it. The other major type of hunting is called the par force, which is the most active and the most closely that resembles warfare. Its name means by strength and was by far the most active form of hunting. Just like the best military campaigns, this was not a free-for-all, but rather a very carefully coordinated series of actions that was divided into several specific steps. Alright, so first the huntsmaster, who was usually accompanied by a limer, would scout for the desired quarry. The main target would usually be deer, especially the hart or an adult male red deer, and for the particularly adventurous, the wild boar. The huntsmaster would find signs of the animal, ideally locate its den, and if possible locate the animal itself. Once the target animal was decided upon, this could not be changed. How you can tell one deer from another or one boar from another, I honestly couldn't say, but there you go. The trail that was taken by the huntmaster would be marked for the actual hunt the next day, usually with ribbons. Now, on the morning of the hunt came the assembly of the participants. They would speak to the hunt master about the quarry, as well as examine evidence that would be gathered the day before. The fecal matter of the animal would be examined if it was available to determine the type and size of the animal, as well as the general health of the creature. I can tell that from the fecal matter. I really don't know, but then again, I'm not a hunt master. In any case, food would be served, and generally speaking, it would just be a big social event. So, after everyone was done eating and everybody was ready, the hunting party set off. Now, at this point, the skill of the hunt master becomes apparent. The course of the fleeing animal would have to be predicted, and relays of the dogs, the rash to be specific, would be posted. Many of species of dogs can run very fast, or breeds of dogs specifically, could run very fast, but not for very long. And by posting these relays, they could keep constant pressure on the animal until it was tired out. Once the relays were set, the limber would be brought up again, and they would track the animal specifically. Once the animal was located, a group of the rash would then be brought in, and they would drive the animal onward. The men that were participating in the hunt would follow on horseback with their weapons ready, and the limber would be kept in reserve as well. If they lost the trail of the animal, the limber would attempt to pick it up again, and like I said before, this was the only target animal they could hunt. If they managed to flush out another animal, they could not chase it, only focusing on the specific animal that was targeted at the beginning. The animal would be driven past several relays of the rashes who would be released. Again, like there would sometimes be upwards of 24 of these animals. So they can keep this up for some while, with the men following on horseback. Now, once the animal was exhausted, it would stop running and instead turn to fight. The animal was then said to be at bay. The dogs would then surround the animal, keeping it in place, and some breeds would actually bite and hold onto the creature, securing it in place with their jaws. The animals would approach and would often dismount, though as you can see depicted here, sometimes they wouldn't. Really depends on their, personal proclivities, and they would finish off the animal. Now, they had to finish it off with a melee weapon of some kind, a spear or a sword. Any sort of bow or crossbow or kind of ranged weapon would not be used. If you were particularly crazy, you would use something like a dagger. Now, as you can expect, this was extremely dangerous. Now, for wild boar, a specialized spear would sometimes be used that would have a crossguard on it. This is because wild boar are incredibly insane animals. Now, most creatures, humans including, when you stab them, have the decency of dying. Wild boar don't do that. Oftentimes, after a boar stab, it will actually run up the spear, impaling itself even further just to gore the hunter with its tusks, and so the crossguard was absolutely necessary to avoid this happening. Again, there were some crazy people out there who actually would stab a wild boar with a sword and, in some cases, a dagger. These people are crazy. These people are insane. Don't be like those people. Now, this, however, was the perfect practice for war. I mean, here's a live creature that's thrashing around, it's fighting back, and you have to close with and stab it in the fastest manner possible. You can just hack away at it, with reckless abandon. You have to actually know what you're doing, and you have to have a steady hand while doing so. So this is really where the training of a nobleman for warfare really is best exemplified within the context of a hunt. Now, once the animal was killed, it would be ritually skinned and gutted, and the dogs would get a share of the meat as a reward. The party would then return home. Throughout the entire event, hunters would coordinate with horns, with a very complex series of notes that would play to signify different things. For example, when the animal was killed, the mort was played, but only if the animal was a male. Other calls included the games afoot, as well as a signal for if the animal was lost, and there would also be directional signals as well. This is also a lot like warfare, where horns and other musical instruments would be used to coordinate large bodies of men, and really there's no difference here. Now, the two major types of animals that would be hunted par force would be the boar and the deer. Though wolves would often be hunted as well. There is a bit of a difference there, though. The boar and the deer would be treated with a modicum of respect. It was almost like there was a certain nobility to this particular type of animal. That you had to treat it a certain way, and that this was killing the animal was seen as dispatching a worthy opponent in a sort of roundabout way of looking at it. Wolves, it was seen as just killing a pest. It was simply a matter of pest control. They were hunted par force, like I said, but they would often use other methods as well, such as using traps, poison, nets, and sometimes putting spikes in meat. Really just anything to get rid of these animals. They were generally hated throughout the Middle Ages for killing off livestock, and basically that was, everybody's food supply, so they were not particularly well respected in medieval society. Virtually every fairy tale's got a big bad wolf in it. It's like that for a reason. So when, say, for example, the par force hunting method was used to capture or to kill wolves, no mort would be played. The mort played on a hunting horn was seen as almost a sign of respect, and wolves simply didn't deserve it. Furthermore, wolves would often be associated with criminals. For example, an outlaw, like Robin Hood, would be referred to as a wolf's head, something to just be disposed of. Nothing particularly noble, there's no protections of the law there, just something to be gotten rid of. Other cultures sometimes refer to it in similar terms as a thief or a murderer, something of that nature. So really this is as much bringing a criminal to justice as it is pest control. There's no nobility to it, there's no real respect here at all. It's just something that has to be killed. So that's it for the video. Hardly an exhaustive look at medieval hunting, but just something I figured it would be interesting for a lot of people. Any case, new videos will be coming out whenever I get around to it. I'll be trying to put them out a lot more frequently. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, hit the like and subscribe button, and share it with your friends, share it with your enemies too. I really don't judge. Alright, that's pretty much it. Have a good day. Or don't have a good day. You're adults, have any kind of day you want. See ya.